Is it live? Small? Small? Okay. Okay, in English, right? Yes. All right, so for those who have yet to meet me, Mateusz introduced me in the previous lesson, and now he is letting me do this by myself. So my name is Amedea. I was already mentioned on the slides the previous time. So I'm glad to be here. And apparently how Mateusz usually introduces me is that I have millions of projects of experience and I'm an expert in the UX field, which sounds way more fancy than it actually is. So I'm going to be with you for the next few sessions, and we're going to be redesigning apps that you've chosen for your projects. And today we're going to be talking about a fitting interface, so what an interface actually means. We'll be talking about guiding principles in UX, so what can we take to help us create interfaces that help people do stuff. And we'll be talking about prototyping, the fun part. So before we start, I wanted to ask you who here made any interviews during homework? Anyone? Yes? Okay. How was it? What was the experience like?
Interesting.
Interesting. That's an interesting word. Can you explain a little bit more?
We made some questions, which we thought were like really good, and then we like gave them to people, and we got just like yes, no answers, and like we didn't find out nothing.
Okay.
So we had to redo them, and then we got some information.
But questions weren't even like, they were almost impossible to be answered with yes or no, because I carefully wrote them, and then one of the like we interviewed two people. One actually gave good answers.
Okay.
There were like not yes or no answers, except for one question, and the other one just answered everything with good, yes or no. I don't even know how that was possible. So we have to rewrite the questions again.
Okay.
Harder to describe it just yes or no.
Cool. That's a great learning experience. It's completely normal. We don't, never in our lives are we taught how to form good questions and trained in that. So it makes a lot of sense that you had to rewrite them. And it's really good for you that you made this reflection and like did the exercise again. We also we test these questionnaires before we actually do them with real people, just so you really understand what kind of answers do you get from asking them. And also in the interviews, you meet really different kinds of people, and some will answer all your questions without even asking them. And then you will have some that, yes, will answer good, yes, no, on questions that actually ask them to explore the subject a little bit more. So that's a completely natural experience. How did you find the answers? Do you think they're useful going into the next steps?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, cool. All right. So we keep talking about good experiences, bad experiences, good interfaces, bad interfaces, but it's really hard to actually define what is good and who defines what is good. So when we started building the interface, there are quite a few questions and design decisions that we have to make. But not only design decisions, but kind of product decisions. And what we start with is usually content, because the content is the most important, right? The content is why people are there. The content is the one that leads people to do stuff, why they are even in the app. We use apps to help us do something. Even Facebook's and social media apps are there to help us do something. So we always, when we're talking about content, we have to ask ourselves, so what kind of materials are we dealing with? Is it a plain material or is something structured? So is it like heaps of data that somebody comes into an app and has to understand really well, very fast? Or is it plain, like text? Are we doing a blog and it just keeps on going and it's very immersive and stuff? The second question is, what kind of language are we using? Is it very specialized? Is this an app, I don't know, a business application that's only used in that specific context? And we use jargon because we use specific words spoken only by those who know, or we're building something much more simple and kind of covering more ground, covering more users, so we have to keep it plain and very straight to the point. We have to talk about, is the content kind of superficial? Is there to be skimmed? Is there to be kind of scrolled by? Or is it more immersive? Are we trying to get people to read stuff, to really immerse themselves into the content? And is there to be very straight to the point, very specific, very clear? Or it should invite you into more of an exploration. So you go into some piece of content and then you go into another one and another one and another one. So you kind of immerse yourself. So that's on content. Then, of course, we have styling. Again, quite a few questions that we need to answer. What type of styling will we use? Will the content be very dense, very packed, with a lot of information? Because sometimes that makes sense. Or will it be very spacious? So, for example, again, are we doing a blog where we will put space in between lines? It will be very airy, it will be very breathy. It will help people to really understand, help them read clearly, immerse themselves. Should it have a utilitarian, so like very strict, non-fluffy, nothing extra, no fancy branding things, or it will be more expressive, so it will be more visual, more interactive, maybe some visualizations like micro interactions and things like that of this into it. We will create more kind of fluff because it makes sense. Again, clarity versus exploration. Is it more inviting or is it getting me just to my end goal directly? And then, of course, we spoke about content, we spoke about styling. Now here are also the functions. So what are we actually building? Is it for consuming? So, for example, media, social media, other kinds of media, news, or creating? So is it a tool? Are we using this app to, I don't know, build something, create something, analyze something? What is it for? Should it be a quick stop or keep you engaged? So one of the things that digital product companies like to measure is retention. So how much time do people, how much time they spend in the app and how many times do they come back? And this is kind of a metric of success. Sure, if you're a Facebook, but if we're doing a scanner app that just takes a picture of a document and transforms it into PDF, does it make sense to measure how much time did I spend in the app? Because usually that number, if it's big, means that something is wrong because I couldn't find my way. right? It doesn't make sense for them to build an immersive experience and try to keep me in the app. That's not the point. It should be a quick stop for me. And if my business model is advertising, then yes, needs to keep me engaged, needs to keep me in the app, needs to understand how to get me there. And all kind of other things like, should it be passive? Should it provide a lot of interactions? Should it collect data from the user? Should it change with the context? And all of these questions are not really just design questions, but they influence the design that we do in the end. So it influences how we build interfaces, and it influences what the end result is. And it's much easier to answer these questions before actually start drawing, because it makes our life much easier, makes our interfaces more consistent as we go along. So can anybody think about any other examples of these comparisons on types of either content or functions or styling? What are kind of differences or anyone? Think about the interfaces you use every day and how they differ from one another. Okay. You will have to do this as part of an exercise later anyways. You'll have to answer all of these questions for your apps that you will be redesigning. So we'll come back later. This is actually a slide more for designers, but nevertheless, it's very important when building an interface and figuring out what's fitting and what's the best use of it, to really think about why we are doing this, why we are building it, who is our user, what will be the real life cases, because yes, it might be pretty, but it's not necessarily useful in the end. And if it's not useful, then we've built it for nothing. We spend a lot of money and a lot of resources for this. And the interface is, especially if you're a digital product company, is the thing that can break an interface, a product, the whole business. And it's important to keep this in mind. Always keep the business context in mind. So on one side we have users, right? You talk to them during your interviews, and we're trying to solve their problems, we're trying to understand their problems, but of course there's also the business side. If we match these two successfully, we usually have a healthy company and happy stakeholders, which is very important. Having this in mind is very important, especially because digital product is a team sport. You will always be part of teams. There will be people who are not only developers, but there are designers, there are product managers, there are stakeholders, and it's important to keep these aspects in mind. In the presentation, there are two links. One is a book, one is a quite cool video if you want to get more into how building interfaces works. But I would like to give of guiding principles. So what to keep in mind when building a solution. So the first thing and the most important one is user goals. So user goals are the thing that user needs to do in the app to achieve something. So you've already done you've done your research, you went to the interviews, you know what people want from your app. Again, apps are there to help people do stuff. So this is an old web page of Airbnb. I don't think it looks like that anymore, but still, what is the main thing for Airbnb? As a business, as a platform, what's the most important thing for them? Booking, yes. Getting people to book a stay somewhere. So what they did is, above the fold, the only thing you see is where do you want to go, when do you want to go, and how many people. Because if we have enough bookings, everything else will follow. We'll have hosts, we'll have experiences, we can build all kinds of stuff if we have the bookings. And that's the main thing. And they prioritized it by putting it on the most visible, making it the most visible thing and the one thing to do there. So not cluttering the interface. Okay. This picture is actually bad because it's missing a part. And here is actually the undo button. I'm not sure if you remember, but I do, and we were very happy when Gmail introduced the undo function. Because how many times do you send an email saying, here is the attachment without the attachment? Everybody does it. So it's really important to keep this aspect in mind. People control the devices and the interfaces, not the other way around. So we always design in a way to give people to redo stuff, to fix their mistakes, and actually to avoid them. Interaction is feedback. So we keep talking about interactions. Everything nowadays is interactive, but rarely do we actually think about what this word means. So interaction means that there is an action and then there's feedback. So if I'm buying burek at Olympia, I would order, that's my action, and the guy at the counter would give me burek. That's his feedback, that's his reaction. And this is something that needs to happen in interfaces too. We need to know where we're going, what's going on, and if our actions created something. So, do you all know Volt? Do you use it?
Yes.
No? Yes? Okay. What's the difference? So, we were able to order food even before Volt, but now everybody does it over Volt. What is the difference? What is the one thing that Volt does so well? What do they do well? You use it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You use it. Why do you use it?
I switch between more or less all the similar companies depending on which one has the lowest price for delivery.
Okay, fair enough.
So they don't really have anything particularly special about them, but Volt and Glovo, for example, are the two biggest franchises for it. They're the most advertised and we see them the most when we walk or drive outside. That's
Okay.
when most of us use it.
Did you use anything else for ordering, or did you use to call for food?
Yeah.
Yeah?
There are a few, like one pizzeria and a few other restaurants that are close to my home.
Mhm.
and my dad still keeps the old like menu brochures that we got,
Cool.
and we can call them. But the thing is, they don't really deliver far.
Hmm.
Volt delivers further than most restaurants do.
Okay. But in terms of features in the Volt app, is there anything that you really like?
The fact that most foods have pictures with them.
Okay.
You don't have to ask for a menu, you have it on there.
Okay.
You don't have to call the restaurant. You don't have
Yeah.
to decide before you call. You can browse
Hmm.
and then just like order in like 3 clicks.
Yeah.
Which is great, but it's also nothing special since, for example, Glovo has the same thing. There's multiple apps that
Yeah,
do
yeah.
the same thing.
Definitely. Glovo and Volt are
More or less the
more
same.
or less the same.
Yeah.
But the one thing they do that is the best for us is it tells you precisely when your food is gonna arrive and where your food is at the moment.
They're
So-
faking the location, actually.
What?
They're faking the location.
Of course they are. Like we're faking these uploads.
The only
Um,
problem is, if you're at the faculty and you order food from Shishka,
yeah.
the cars go directly across the hill. There's a route there, apparently.
Really?
Yeah, and you can check it, and it's gonna seem like he's driving with a car, like on Rozhnik and going down, you know, like this footpath. So yeah,
Mm.
I know it because I've been checking it about 14 days ago on a Sunday evening while I was here, and it took him 1 hour to get here, and he was like slowly going across Rozhnik with Clio. So quite
Well,
impossible, but yeah. You're
if-
faking the location, but you're far more satisfied.
Exactly. That's what it's about, right? Having the control, knowing stuff, knowing when we do something, precisely what is going on. And when you're hungry, it's very important to know when your food.
For me, the much better feature is that I don't have to call anyone. And
I
that's
agree.
more important to me than the location of my food.
I agree.
Can I
For me
ask,
also.
Why does that give people the sense of having control over anything? Seeing
Oh
the
God,
location
you people are so young. You don't understand what the world looked like before. We ordered a pizza when I was a student, and they would tell us it's 45 minutes, and it was always 90. So you're at home, you don't know if you can move because you don't know when the delivery guy will show up, and you're very hungry, which also means you're hangry, and it's not a good experience for your roommates. And it's interesting. It's not just Volt. It's also Uber. You know, we don't have it here, but it's the similar experience.
Yeah, Uber Eats. But I'm curious because on Volt or Glovo, the time that's written, like when your food is supposed to arrive, changes. You can look at the time at any point and it says where your food's supposed to be, but in the end you get the same result. It still gets there later or earlier than it said originally, and they don't really give you an exact time but more of a time frame of like 20 minutes. I don't see how that's really much different from what it used to be. I feel like the 19 minutes you've said were a really bad experience with the restaurant, because my dad, when he was a kid, and he's 56 years old now, never had that issue because he called for pizza and it was there in 15 minutes.
Well, that's a good pizzeria then.
It is.
Maybe he should share the.
It's very expensive too. It's the Pizzeria Novak in Polje.
Cool.
But I'm curious from a psychological standpoint, because I just
It's about not knowing, being unsure.
Yeah, but
think
you're
it's the same
unsure
with-
even if they draw something very prettily.
No,
in
I'm
the-
never unsure. I always know that the food
I
is
think it's
arrived.
the
It
same with-
makes me happy.
Travana or Urbana app, do you use any
Yeah.
of those? Yeah, with Travana you know your bus is I don't know, let's say your bus is coming at 3 exact, like
Mhm.
it's supposed to be there. You check Travana, you see, okay, it's going to be 4 minutes late. You
Yeah.
know, you can get out of the house later, you can walk slower, you can stop on your way to take out the trash. Or you can just like check where exactly it is. it's like less pressure on you, and also you have the feeling of like you know it, like you know when it's going to come.
Mhm.
That's fair, but just before we've said that Volt doesn't actually show you and track the location of the drivers, it just calculates where it's supposed to be. Meanwhile, Trevana does actually work with LPP and does track buses, which I know because Trevana was developed on a school I was in.
It's about giving your users a feeling that, you know, these lines.
Yeah.
It's not really at 60% like it shows,
Yeah.
but it gives users a feeling that everything is okay, something is happening, and this process will end at some point, or something will break down and it will show you that there was a mistake, you have to do it again.
So then most people just actually believe that the food is where it shows that it is. It's
Of
about
course.
feeling people.
It's not really about where it is, it's that it's coming.
Yeah,
That there wasn't a problem.
assurance.
Sure.
It's about assurance.
Mm.
It's about assurance the end result that I need is going to happen. And for example, this was first introduced with the Uber apps, actually. And it was a big deal because at that point, you didn't know if a taxi will show up. You could call, and you didn't know when. You didn't know if it's going to be at the right location. Now, all the taxi apps have a version of this. Not a good one, but they have. So it is about giving feedback to people. All right. Using metaphors from physical world to lessen the cognitive load. So we all know that the bin on the computer is just another folder. But when you give it an icon and call it a bin, everybody knows that this is where files get to be discarded. Because it's such a simple connection to our physical world that it just makes so much sense. Nobody thinks about it. Do you have any other examples? What would be a similar thing that you've seen?
Folders are the shape of a folder.
True?
I
Yes.
don't know what the alternative would be because there are always folders.
That's true.
Like a button could be like in the shape of like a circle and like
Mhm.
so a bit of a shadows to give it a 3D look. So see what's important.
Yeah, definitely. And we also have the feeling of a button when we click, right? It has four states. It has this feeling that it's from the outside world, that it's 3D. Cool. What else? People on my left. Any examples of things from the real world or other metaphors? It doesn't have to be from the real world.
Like design tools.
Mhm.
For example, using a pen tool.
Mhm.
So like your mouse gets the icon of a pen even though you're still using your mouse.
Yeah.
And you have a feeling like you're drawing with a pen or a pencil.
Yeah.
Or a brush, but it's still just a mouse.
Yeah.
Maybe that could.
Cool. Awesome. I see the wheels are turning there. All right. Another thing which is very obvious, right? Keeping consistency throughout the app. It's very obvious, it seems very simple, and it's not as simple if you've ever seen an app that does not have like a very large amount of people behind it. So if we scratch the Facebooks and the Instagrams, and where it's actually really weird because they have huge design teams for a very few screens, right? Keeping consistency is really hard because many people work on this. Everybody has a little bit a different idea of what the app should look like, see things a bit different, things get lost in translation between one team to another team, and then we can end up with a very messy looking app. And we really want to have this consistency, not because it looks good, but because when we teach people that something happens with this type of button, we want them to always understand that this is the action that is going to happen. Again, keeping the consistency helps people use our products. Again, supporting them to come to the end, to their end goal. Clarity over complexity, we already mentioned this. And this is, although this is, I think, a 3-year-old screenshot, it's still, this page is still the same. PayPal has nothing on there. You just come there on the login screen, and there's the login form and nothing else. Because they know that the real money or what users want to do is when they log in, and they don't detract them from anything. So they just keep their screen white, they put this in the focus and just help them successfully log in, because that's the intended use of this screen. And this is what needs to happen. Something that relates to consistency is form follows function. So if it looks like a button, it should be a button. If it looks like an input field, it should be an input field. How using patterns that we are used to and we know help our users reach certain goals. So always think about what makes something really, really clear on the type of interface pattern. So here you can see you already have the ticker inside. It's blinking. Everybody knows it's an input field. Everybody understands almost immediately, if they've used an interface before, of course, that this is something where you put in text, even if it doesn't have a label. A topic not explored enough is accessibility. So there's a large number of people among us who have different types and levels of impairments, and I'm talking about everything, not just from hearing loss, but also just color blindness, not seeing enough, and all the other stuff. And it's really important that we bring these topics up, because it's much easier to build an accessible app, especially when we're building for a larger amount of people and larger amount of users. It's much easier to build accessibility in from the start than it is to add it on top at some point where we have 400 different pages and a limited amount of flows to cover. So this is more of food for thought. And then the previous group didn't know the free click myth. Have you heard of the free click myth, where everything should be accessed in 3 clicks? Cool, I like that you don't know that. So a while ago, when we started talking about UX and stuff, and how we started with the websites and how websites should be organized in clear ways, there was this myth that everything should be accessible, all the information should be accessed within 3 clicks, which is still true for the websites, because we need to, again, know our users, know why they come to our websites and what they are looking for, and get them in about 3 clicks. So helping them find what they are looking for and not get them pissed at us, basically. But when we're building the apps, things get more complicated. Because what started happening is that some apps require, 24 different input fields for us to put in. It happens. And it's not necessarily a bad practice. The question is, how do we design the steps and how do we kind of break it out in chunks that will help people get to the end of it? Because with the myth, everybody just kind of split it in 2 or 3, created 3 pages with 8 input fields each, and then you have validation and you don't know what you did wrong and people get frustrated and then they leave you for the competition. Because there's always competition. Even if you don't think there's competition, there's definitely competition. And your customers will find it and they will leave you. So the whole idea of this is to not frustrate. We try to not frustrate our users much. And when we're with frustrations, talking about frustrations, how much does this frustrate you? Trying to find a password that will work and it doesn't have instructions on what exactly is required of you. No? Nobody gets frustrated at this?
That happened recently when we had to change our passwords for school emails. There were no instructions, and people figured it out on their own and sent instructions to others.
Yes.
You didn't know what to.
Yes. We need to know. If I have the rules, I can follow the rules. If I don't have the rules, there is a big chance I will break them and I will be very frustrated and very pissed. And again, doing stuff for school, you have to do it, right? You kind of have to adhere, but it would be so much nicer experience if you had it written down. But then in real life, when there are other apps, well, yes, also these types of things make people jump ship. Okay, before we go into prototyping, we'll do a little bit of an exercise. So, I'm going to ask you to go back to the questions that we had in the slides, so in the fitting interface. And in your groups, whoever has a group, or even if you're doing the same projects, you can group if it makes it easier, or by yourselves. Go through the questions and try to answer them. Talk a little bit about what kind of content do you have, what kind of styling do you need, what kind of functions will you have. So you had the research, and now we're going into the redesigning your app phase. So you make these product decisions, and then we can go into prototyping. So I will put on some music, and I will give you 15 minutes to the slides are already in Učilnica, so you can download it. FigJam, this one is also is the same link as previous week, so it's also on Učilnica from the previous week. And if anybody needs help or has any questions, I'm here to answer them. I will just quickly jump to the toilet, but I will take my microphone off.
It wouldn't be the first time the lecture
Superficial je, da je v bistvu tako, ne vem, če dam primer social media, je nekaj, kar v bistvu tako malo skimaš, pa mogoče pol kaj klikneš, pa pol greš v ta immersive state. Ampak je namen, da
Tako pregledovanje.
Ja,
Aha,
ja.
immersive je pa tisto.
greš pa res noter, ne, ker se pa posvetiš, pa ne vem, videi, pa artikli, pa take stvari.
We're doing this based on the websites we chose for our projects?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
So you will be redesigning the app that you've chosen.
I see.
Kakšno vprašanje na...
Zaenkrat ne.
A ja, se ti gledaš, ne?
Pogledam. Pa si priznam tega. To je to prenovljeni dizajn. Logiraj se mi. Ja, a vidiš ti kompe spodaj? SOS-a ne klikam glih, ampak ja.
Kako je pa SOS?
Mislim, da bodo, ja. Ne, se tega pusti. What the fuck? Pa sem
Ja. I did something.
Najd mi login. A ja, ok, starem. Čak se je slogal tam tle.
V bistvu delaš QA.
Sam ti ne smem pokazati.
Gledaj na stran. Jaz bi rekla pač pol tle.
Sem priješ na live, ker nima nobene veze. Če mi je zdaj moj developer napisal, da mu je bilo hitreje v kodi pogledati, kje je login button, kot pa ga najti na user interface.
In kje je?
Ne, tam meni je kar nekaj, tako what the fuck, zdaj to.
Kdaj so delo? Kako vam bili?
Čakaj,
A,
čakaj. Tukaj. No, strp telefon.
Oh,
Prvo, kaj pa je? Pokliči imaš maj. Maybe not. Neko kazi.
Okay, so the last minute. How's it going?
Can you say something?
Yes, I can, yeah. All right. So, what did you figure out? Any design decisions made? Yes, no, maybe? Not really.
Yeah.
Which app are you working on?
Outlook.
Okay. What kind of interface should it have? I can show. Maybe I'll show. So in terms of content and styling, does anybody else also have Autolog?
My group does, but they're not here.
Okay. Did you make any of decisions or thought about it?
The only thing I could remember off the top of my head is that we figured out that Autolog doesn't really have any pictures of cars.
Okay.
And that's what bothered my dad when I interviewed him, so my
Okay.
only real proposition would be to add pictures.
Mm-hmm. Okay. To make it more visually stimulating.
Yeah,
All right.
and because when you're choosing a used car, the most important thing is to see in what condition it is,
Sure.
which I do also know because I have my own car. So
Cool. Anything else to add?
Not really. I mean, I can see why like the pictures.
Okay.
Like here because it's pretty much just all like technical aspects of the car.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if you're gonna buy a used car, you should see it in person anyway. I'm pretty sure, like, the users could like take pictures and put it on here, then they would like cover all like the issues with the car anyways. So, and you need to drive it anyways to feel it. So,
So no improvements, no
they'd be
suggestions.
nice, but I don't know. I can see why they're not on the website.
Okay. You two have been designing something,
Sketching.
sketching.
Okay, so our app is Troubadour,
Mm-hmm.
and for content, we figured out our content is more plain
Mm-hmm.
structured. Then we use lots of jargon because
Mhm.
it's targeted for a specific audience,
Okay.
like a more specific group that they target than a like general public. Then okay, the content should be more superficial than immersive,
Mm-hmm.
and we encourage exploration of the app.
Okay.
Not really diving into anything.
Superficial in terms of skimming through the different lessons or things
Yes,
like that.
So we don't want the users to like jump right into it. We want them to explore, like
Mm-hmm.
to see where they're, which lessons are they not focusing enough on, or check the scoreboard like before they jump right into the like lessons.
Okay.
It's like when I used Duolingo, I was first thing I did was see like what lessons do I have to continue.
Mhm.
Like if you're only doing like one specific like lesson, like only like training, like for example the rhythm, you're focusing less on other lessons, and we want the users to explore first.
Mm-hmm.
Then when it comes to styling, we think it should be more spacious,
Okay.
less expressive, a lot,
Mm-hmm.
because it's targeted to a younger audience, like children and young adults. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't want boring UX and UI.
Cool.
And yes, expression again. Encourage
Exploration.
exploration. Then with functions,
Mm-hmm.
we figured out it's meant for more. It's meant for consuming content
Mhm.
rather than creating, even though it's a learning app. So it's
Yeah.
leaning more towards the consuming.
Definitely.
Then we want the user to be engaged, of course. You
Mhm.
don't get much from learning for 10 minutes. It's better to
Mhm.
keep them on the app for at least like an hour. Then we want to provide a lot of interaction, especially because it's targeted to younger audience with interaction, like pop-ups, buttons, like maybe mini games, whatever. Lots of interaction.
Okay.
We will be collecting some data from the user while using the app, like
Mhm.
how are they doing, like this lesson going well, did it help them, like
Mhm.
maybe to see if they need to skip some lessons, like where to place them, and the functions would be changing with the context.
Okay.
I think
If
it,
like a person already knows some stuff,
Mhm.
maybe skip a couple lessons and stuff.
Okay.
so they don't become bored. We don't want them to be bored.
And if they make a lot of mistakes, then they get more of the same lessons and
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Okay. Cool. This is how this exercise is done. Thank you. All right. The last part of the theory for today, let's jump into prototyping. So one of the things that most of us do is that we call everything that lives in Figma a prototype. But prototype only happens when we learn something from that and we give it to somebody to use and to test. Then and only then it is a prototype. But before we go into details of the prototyping, I want to show you how this process works. So we usually end up the research phase, which is before, and we do kind of synthesis, and we end up with a brief, so a brief for the solution. And we kind of do it in at least 3 iterations. So first we go into the concept, which can be either wireframes or low fidelity prototypes. So something very basic, happy flows. We don't go into the nitty-gritty, into the details. It's really good if we create a paper prototype at first, because paper prototypes are really cheap and really fast and we don't get attached. So we go and validate that. That means that we actually go outside, we talk to the people that will be using this, and we confirm or not confirm our assumptions. And only when we have confirmed our assumptions that the direction, the general direction into which we are going makes sense for the users, do we continue with another circle. So then we go into interactive prototypes. These are usually low fidelity. I'll explain more about low fidelity prototypes a little bit later. But they are basic. We start developing the app, we connect the flows, we do all the screens, but we don't yet do the fancy visual stuff. So we talk about content, and again, we test the content with the users, and only then we add the visual layer, we add the branding, the nice. When we do the detailed prototype, we also test it, and usually this is a usability test, where we actually test if everything is at its place, if it makes sense to people, if the interactions are all there, and things like that. And this is a bit, there is no final version, because no digital product is ever done. And it would be very welcome if development people would actually help already here. So it doesn't happen that designers deliver the final version and then we find out that nothing of this fancy stuff that we have designed cannot be built or is too expensive to be built, and then we do shitty versions of stuff. So if the picture is worth 1,000 words, the prototype is worth 1,000 meetings. Very true, very tall order. Prototype is an early version of a thing. Anything can really be a prototype. It can be an object, it can be a process, it can be a document, it can be a life choice, it can be a prototype. So really these first things that are meant to be kind of a testing phase or an example or something for us to learn to get feedback as soon as possible is a prototype. What isn't a prototype? It's not a presentation and it's not a description. If I would open my Figma files and I would show you one of my designs and I would be explaining here stuff and I would be clicking through it, that is not prototyping. That is presentation. I'm telling you how it should be done. Prototyping is when I open the prototypes on your computers and I make you click through stuff and I pay attention to what you are doing, why you are doing it, and what you're thinking with it. So getting feedback. Prototype always shows how a solution works. And not only shows, but you get to experience it. Who has seen this? Have you seen this already? No? Okay, the first time. So a version of this comic or sketch or drawing has been going around offices since the 70s of the previous century, which is a very long time ago, and we still haven't completely figured it out. And it basically shows how when we speak, each of us has a different understanding of what this person has said, because words, our understanding of words is impacted or influenced by our upbringing, by our experiences, and everybody has a different experience and kind of builds a different picture in their head. So if you've ever sat in a meeting with a lot of different people, there's a big chance that everybody went out of that meeting with a completely different idea of what was just discussed. And that's what causes problems. But when we start drawing things, even with shitty sketches, not making pretty pictures, but like just putting stuff on paper, then we get to see the same picture. And even this one, when you see it, when you go through it, all of us now have the same understanding of what this is about. And I could not explain it in a way that every one of us would have the same picture in mind. So that's why we're trying to build stuff. We're putting stuff on paper, we start drawing stuff, we start building prototypes, things that are interactive, that give us the feel of how stuff works, because using only words doesn't really work. Before we continue with the types of prototypes, any questions up until here? All clear? Okay. So the first method of prototyping is already mentioned, paper prototypes. It's kind of unfortunate that get used as much, because it's one of the methods that is the cheapest, the fastest, and really just the most efficient. And also, what it does is, because we create it really fast, and because it's on paper, we can actually throw it away. Because the one thing with prototyping, you should be throwing every prototype away. But then we don't do that with Figma prototypes because we spend so much time in it, do we? Not saying that you should throw your Figma files away, but kind of we have to learn with every prototype, and if we don't learn anything new, there's something wrong. Like either we ask the wrong questions, or something's fishy. you always get feedback. And most of people also think that paper prototypes look really cheap, and that it looks like play, and that people won't take us seriously if we present them with a paper prototype. And this is actually on the left. I used to work at a medical startup, and first I spent 2 days. I had this user test planned for, we're doing an app for clinical pathways, so where people, like, where doctors draw flowcharts and stuff. And I tried to prototype it in a design tool and figuring out how all these different interactions will work and how can I present this, and I lost 2 days and I still wasn't ready, and then I built it from cardboard and just simulated what happens on the screen because it was good enough. And the doctor didn't mind, my CEO didn't mind, he was actually impressed by ingenuity of it. And it's such a really, really good tool. If you can, always use paper first. Another prototyping method that is not used enough is actually acting out. Acting out is most commonly used in service design, where we prototype like the whole services, you know, like going to the post office and doing stuff there, or going to the bank. But they're also very useful for prototyping digital services. So, how does it look like? We have a person who simulates the interface, because interface is actually communication with the device. So there was a team in Germany, and of course I don't know how familiar you are with different dating apps that go beyond Tinder and the swipes, but there are dating apps that actually ask you a lot of questions that you have to fill out to kind of create your profile, to give more information about yourself to the other person. And it was so much easier to actually put a person, made them play a role of the interface, posing that question to different people and realizing what kind of answer do they get. And it was so much more efficient than just putting all this input fields into Figma, and then you can't really prototype it because you can't have the interaction. So it makes sense. So always pay attention to what makes sense to use as a tool. Not always is Figma the right answer. There's also on the slides, there's this YouTube link. BBC did a skit a few years ago. It's 4 minutes long, it's hilarious, and it will show you how interfaces talk to us. It's ridiculous. It's really bad. When you'll see that, you'll see how acting out can actually help you do this stuff better. Desktop prototypes usually used to prototype bigger systems, or again, services which include different people, different facilities, different systems. They don't get used as much in digital product design, but just so you know, this exists also. And then, of course, we have the low-fidelity prototypes. This is probably familiar. The thing about low-fidelity prototypes is we focus on the content. The content is already there. We no longer use lorem ipsums. Everybody knows lorem ipsum, what lorem ipsum is, the dummy text. We use the real content because we want to know what the interface looks like. We want to talk about interaction already. We want to know which types of interface patterns do we use, and we want to test these things. So no longer should happen, like a while ago, it would be very common for a client to come to a designer and say, oh, we need a new website. Can you design us a new website? And you would ask, so where is the content? Oh, we'll do the content later. And then we did the fancy designs, and we say, okay, here is going to be a picture. Here you have some text and things. No, always content first. Fancy design comes last, and it's better if it doesn't come than if the content is bad. Don't put always form follows function, not the other way around. And then, of course, we have high-fidelity prototypes where we have some branding, we have the colors, we have the icons, and everything that we need. You have the branding. And the difference is high-fidelity prototypes are usually used in the really final stages, and we test here the usability. So that means that we test really the details, if everything is on its space where it's supposed to be, if people find all the information, is the all information marked right, and things like that. At the company where I worked, we already had a design system which made putting together high-fidelity prototypes very easy. But we made a conscious decision to actually go away from the high-fidelity ones, which looked like they were already coded, right, for the testers. And we went into low-fidelity prototypes. Why? Because with high-fidelity prototypes, you get the questions, why is this button orange? And nobody talks about content anymore. And you, if you're at that stage, you need to understand if the content is okay, if the data you are showing actually helps people do stuff. And then, when you figure out the content, yes, we can have the debate if it's okay that the button is orange. So when we put things into Figma, we connect them. We connect the buttons and the screens, and we can create all kinds of stuff. During our sessions together, we won't be doing Figma lessons. There is a lot of content already out there. I prepared a list of it, and it's in the slides. So if you haven't yet used any design tools, or it's your first time in Figma, do yourselves a favor, take 20 minutes, watch a tutorial to do it, just to get a grip of basic interactions. But what will be expected of you in the next phases of our spending time together is to basically do a low-fidelity prototype redesigned from the existing one into something new. It can be improvement. It can be something else. So try to connect it to the feedback you got from the interviews, and try to create a new version of the app. You'll be doing a low-fidelity prototype, which means that you can also use any kind of design system or something that already has components there. There are a lot of free resources online, so go ahead and look for them and see if anything helps you, but you can also just draw the squares by yourselves. By the next time, we expect you to create the first version of it in Figma already, but it's not the upgraded one, but just kind of set your project, get the main screens inside what you will be using, so you have things to work with. That you have components ready, and then from the next one, you will be working on the upgrades. Cool? All right. That's it for today. Any questions? I guess then that's really it for today. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to everyone watching at home. And I will see you next week.